Time for our business bulletin now, for which I'm joined by Stephen Carroll. Hello to you, Stephen. Starting off with Angela Merkel here in Paris today.
Yeah, that's right. She's meeting French President Francois Hollande. They're going to be talking about youth unemployment. France and Germany earlier in the week gave us some details of their plan to tackle this European-wide issue. Angela Merkel said is planning to hold a meeting of the 27 EU Labour ministers in early July on this as well. They'll also be discussing the wider European economy. Berlin toning down its push for austerity after criticism from many quarters that it's hurting Europe's economic recovery, but still insisting that budget deficits need to be brought down.
This is the day after the European Commission confirmed that it was giving France and some others a little bit more time to balance their budgets.
Yeah, 2 years more for Paris to bring its budget deficit below that limit of 3%. The European Commission took the opportunity to ramp up pressure on President Francois Hollande's government to increase its pace of reforms. Among the recommendations coming from Brussels to reduce the cost of labour, reform the pension system, privatise state industries and reduce public spending. Easier said than done in most cases. The French government insists it's serious about reforms, but says that it'll do them on its own timetable.
As for structural reform, and notably pension reform, it's up to us, and only us, to choose the right path to reach our objective. We'll have a €20 billion pension deficit by 2020, so we'll have to carry out these reforms by concerting with the people in a just and responsible manner. But the European Commission shouldn't dictate to us what we should do. Simply put, France needs to boost its public funds.
Now, another of those recommendations was to open up certain protected professions here in France, among them that of civil law notaries. They're involved in many common legal transactions here in France, like buying property or executing a will. There are just 9,500 of them for the whole country. They earn huge fees for their services in comparison to other European countries. Catherine Viette has more.
Jean-Michel Cadier has been a French notary for the past 35 years. It's a highly specialized and protected profession in France. Civil law notaries are public officers who operate in every area of French law. They oversee wills, marriage contracts, property sales. In fact, they have a monopoly over all these contracts. There are 9,500 notaries across France. They're appointed by the Justice Ministry and are extremely well paid, making an average of €19,000 a month. Their fees are set by the French government. A review by the European Commission found French notaries to be the most expensive in Europe. On property worth €250,000, the average fee for a French notary is €2,913. In Germany, it's €1,401, and in the UK, it's just €676. The European Commission would like to see these prices lowered. The notary's monopoly has been challenged before. In 2008, a proposition was made to open up the profession to all lawyers without success.
The notaries are organized into a very powerful lobby, very influential, listened to by those in power. They're close to key ministries too. They generate taxes for the finance ministry, and they're also close to the justice ministry.
For the past 50 years, neither governments on the left or the right have been able to reform the powerful notary profession.
An extraordinary system, a good job if you can get it. Stephen, the markets.
Yeah, particularly distressing news for some in Japan today. The Nikkei, another sharp downward spiral, down 4.96% just a couple of minutes ago. This is part of the ongoing volatility we've seen in the Nikkei. It was down almost 7% this day last week. The Nikkei's risen more than 36% since the start of the year, largely down to the action being taken by the Japanese central bank to ease Japan's deflation, in particular, targeting inflation and printing more money, bringing down the cost of Japanese exports. Now, this latest twist is partly being attributed to the OECD's comments that Europe's recession is hitting the rest of the world. Just one example again today of how difficult it is for some companies in Japan. Panasonic cutting 5,000 jobs.
Meanwhile, the Nasdaq Stock Exchange paying up over that Facebook fumble.
That's right. Computer glitches at the Nasdaq Stock Exchange last May delayed the start of trading on Facebook shares and threw the launch largely into chaos. The technical problems kept many investors from being able to buy the shares in what was one of the biggest initial public offerings in history. Nasdaq has now agreed to pay a $10 million fine to settle federal civil charges over the launch, the biggest of its kind against a stock exchange, and that's on top of $62 million it's already had to pay out to investment companies who say they made losses because of the problems. We'll move on now with a look of some of the other business news. Apple looks set to reduce its dependence on the controversial electronics manufacturer Foxconn. Reports in the Wall Street Journal say the company is going to use rival Pegatron to build its new low-cost iPhone. The Taipei-based firm already makes some iPhone and iPad mini tablets and is said to be willing to accept smaller profits to win Apple's business.
Staff at museums and galleries in Britain are staging a one-day strike over cuts to pay and jobs. The action will affect some of London's biggest tourist spots like the British Museum and the National Gallery. Workers at national heritage sites, including Stonehenge, are planning a walkout for this Sunday.
And the world's biggest pork producer, Smithfield Foods, is to be sold for $4.7 billion. China's Shuanghui International is the buyer. The deal will be the biggest ever Chinese buyout of a US company and will face heavy scrutiny by regulators before it goes ahead. Shares spiked a massive 25% at the news.
Okay, next up, the OECD group of developed economies saying they're expecting just 1.2% global growth. Not great. Things a little bit brighter in parts of Africa.
That's right. Well, the African Development Bank tells us that their expectation for growth in Africa this year is 4.8%, much better than the OECD and also better than the IMF global growth forecast too. Ghana is one of Africa's fastest growing economies. Their annual growth rate 8% and is attracting investors from abroad, particularly from China. Josh Vardy has the story.
Ghana has taken a leading position on the African continent. The country is rich in minerals, politically stable, and currently experiencing 8% growth. That hasn't escaped the attention of foreign investors, particularly the Chinese. There are already around 300 Chinese businesses in Ghana.
In this area, we have about 7 to 8 Chinese factories.
Stephen Chun from Hong Kong has marked out his own corner of the market. He employs 30 Ghanaians at his factory to produce calcium carbonate, mainly used as an ingredient in paint.
So this is the shell from it's a deposit. So it's covered with mud and small stones.
Under almost 40 degrees centigrade heat and having to work bent over all the time means a job here can be tough, not to mention low paid. In China, these employees would be paid 4 or 5 times more than they are here. Stephen has a friend who owns the most popular Chinese restaurant in town. His staff are mostly locals. One client says the reason the Chinese are doing so well in Ghana is that they're prepared to work non-stop.
We can work in 24 hours. Really. This is what we are different. But in Ghana, they have their working time.
This kind of view has caused tensions in the community. On the streets, there are complaints that the Chinese have been monopolizing jobs that would have normally gone to Ghanaians.
From Ghana to Venezuela, Stephen, finally, a country where shortages are not unknown. I think they were out of toilet paper recently, and now there's another potential headache for the Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's right. The company that makes sacramental wine, or altar wine, for the churches in Venezuela has said that it can't guarantee continuous production because of a shortage of the supplies needed to make the wine. Now, Vino Ecclesia is the name of the company. They've also pointed out they're having problems buying in the wine from abroad because of a shortage of foreign currency. The country's Catholic Bishops' Conference has advised churches that in the alternative they should use the purest and most natural wine available. Another possible looming crisis is a shortage of the wheat needed to make altar bread. So Catholic churches also suffering from those shortages in Venezuela.
Wow. Stephen Carroll, thank you very much. That's it for business. Do stay with us here in Live from Paris. More news coming up very shortly with Claire Pride.